Mill secretly spiked my drink at my wedding. I fainted, the reception was ruined, and now she's trying to buy my forgiveness with $5,000 because my hubby made his decision. I, 28F, have been with my husband Jake, 30M, for 5 years, married for 6 months. Jake's family has always been a bit intense. His mom Sandra, 57F, in particular has had issues with boundaries and letting go. She's the stereotypical overbearing mother who thinks no woman will ever be good enough for her precious baby boy. From day one, she's made little digs about my appearance, my career, my family, you name it. Jake has generally been good about shutting it down, but he also tends to downplay things, saying that's just how mom is or she means well. The wedding planning process was a nightmare. Sandra tried to take over every aspect, the venue, the guest list, the menu, even my dress. I put my foot down on a lot of it, which led to some massive arguments. Jake was caught in the middle but ultimately sided with me, which just made Sandra resent me more. By the time the wedding rolled around, things were incredibly tense. The ceremony itself went fine. Sandra behaved, probably because there were so many witnesses. But at the reception, all hell broke loose. I have a severe nut allergy that everyone close to me knows about. I'm always extremely careful about what I eat and drink. During the reception, I was sipping on a glass of champagne and chatting with some college friends when I started to feel off. My throat got tight, I felt dizzy, and then everything went black. I woke up in the hospital. Apparently, I had gone into anaphylactic shock and collapsed on the dance floor. Jake told me that someone had managed to use my EpiPen, thank God, but I still needed to be rushed to the ER. The reception obviously came to a screeching halt. Many of the guests left in shock and concern. What was supposed to be the happiest day of our lives had turned into a complete disaster. As I lay there in the hospital bed, still groggy from the meds, I overheard Jake arguing with someone in the hallway. It was Sandra. And what I heard made my blood run cold. Sandra was sobbing, saying over and over, "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for this to happen. I just wanted to teach her a lesson." Jake's voice was low and furious. "What the hell are you talking about, Mom? Teach her what lesson?"
Sandra, I put some almond extract in her champagne glass.
Just a tiny bit. I thought it would make her lips swell up or give her a rash or something. I wanted to show everyone that she's not perfect, that she has flaws too. I never meant for her to get so sick. I must have gasped or made a noise, because they both came rushing into the room. Jake looked horrified. Sandra looked terrified. You tried to poison me?" I croaked out. Sandra fell to her knees beside the bed. No, I swear I wasn't trying to poison you. I just wanted to embarrass you a little. I'm so sorry, I had no idea it would be this bad." Jake physically pulled her away from me. "Get out," he growled. "Get the fuck out right now before I call security." Sandra left, wailing dramatically the whole way. Jake took my hand, tears in his eyes. "Baby, I am so sorry. I had no idea she would, I can't believe she would, God, I'm just so sorry." I spent the night in the hospital for observation. Jake never left my side. When I was released the next morning, we went home to find about 1 million messages from family and friends checking on me. Jake's phone was blowing up with texts and calls from Sandra, all of which he ignored. We spent the next few days in a kind of numb shock. Our wedding night and honeymoon were obviously ruined. All of our wedding gifts and decorations were still at the venue. We didn't know what to tell people. And hovering over it all was the question of what to do about Sandra. Jake was adamant that he wanted to cut her out completely. He was beyond furious and kept saying he would never forgive her for this. I was angry too, of course, but also confused. Part of me wondered if maybe Sandra really hadn't meant for things to go this far. Maybe it really was just a stupid, thoughtless prank gone horribly wrong. I told Jake I needed some time to process before we made any big decisions. He reluctantly agreed, but said he wouldn't speak to Sandra until I was ready. A week went by. Then 2. Sandra kept trying to contact both of us, calling, texting, even sending letters. We ignored it all. Jake and I were both struggling. What should have been our honeymoon period was instead filled with stress and resentment. We were snapping at each other over little things. I could tell Jake felt guilty, like this was somehow his fault for not seeing how unstable his mother was. I felt angry and violated, but also conflicted about potentially coming between Jake and his mom. Then yesterday, everything came to a head. We got home from work to find Sandra sitting on our front steps. Jake immediately started yelling at her to leave, but she begged us to just hear her out. Against my better judgment, I convinced Jake to let her come inside and talk. Sandra was a mess. She looked like she hadn't slept in weeks. Her eyes were red and puffy from crying. She fell to her knees the moment she walked in the door, sobbing and apologizing over and over. "I know I can never make up for what I did," she wailed. "I know I ruined everything. I've been going to therapy, trying to understand why I did such a horrible thing. I was jealous and petty and cruel. I thought if I could just make you look bad for one night, Jake would see that you weren't so perfect. But I realize now how sick that is. I'm so ashamed. I'll do anything at all, to try to make this right." Jake and I exchanged glances. I could see the conflict in his eyes, anger warring with long ingrained love for his mother. "There's nothing you can do to make this right," Jake said coldly. "You could have killed her. Over what? Your own insane jealousy? I don't even recognize you anymore." Sandra reached into her purse with shaking hands. She pulled out an envelope and held it out to me. "I know money can't fix this," she said. "But I want you to have this. It's $5,000. Use it however you want, to replace the wedding gifts that got left behind, to take a new honeymoon, whatever. It's the least I can do." I stared at the envelope in shock. Jake snatched it out of her hand and tore it open. Sure enough, there was a cashier's check for $5,000 inside. "You think you can just buy your way out of this?" Jake shouted. "This is insulting." I put a hand on his arm. "Jake, wait. Let's just take a breath here." Sandra looked at me with desperate hope in her eyes. "Please," she whispered. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness. But I love Jake so much, and I want to love you too. I want to be a real family. I'll do whatever it takes, more therapy, family counseling, anything. Just please don't cut me out of your lives forever." Jake turned to me, his expression torn. "It's your call," he said softly. "Whatever you decide, I'll support you." And that's where things stand now. I'm honestly at a loss. Part of me wants to take the money, tell Sandra to fuck off forever, and try to move on with our lives. But another part of me wonders if there's any chance of salvaging this relationship. Jake is an only child, and Sandra is a widow. If we cut her off completely, she'll have no family left. I know what she did was absolutely horrible. She endangered my life and ruined our wedding day. But she seems genuinely remorseful. Is there any coming back from something like this? Can trust ever be rebuilt? Or am I crazy for even considering it? Some other factors to consider. 1. Jake and I had been planning to start trying for a baby soon. The thought of Sandra being a grandmother both terrifies and saddens me. I always imagined our kids would have 2 sets of loving grandparents. 2. Jake's dad passed away when he was in college. Sandra has been alone ever since, and I know Jake has always felt some guilt about abandoning her when he moved away for work. Cutting her off would be heartbreaking for him, even though he says he's willing to do it. 3. We live about 3 hours away from Sandra. If we did try to reconcile, we wouldn't have to see her super often. But holidays and family events would obviously be very complicated. 4. I'm an only child too, and my parents live across the country. Having local family support would be really nice, especially when we do have kids. But obviously not at the expense of my safety and peace of mind. 5. The $5,000 is tempting, I won't lie. Our wedding and honeymoon savings are pretty much wiped out between hospital bills and lost deposits. But it also feels icky, like she's trying to buy her way back into our lives. So Reddit, what do I do? Do I take the money and run? Try to forgive and rebuild? Compromise with very limited, supervised contact? I'm totally lost here. Any advice or outside perspectives would be greatly appreciated. Edit, wow, this blew up way more than I expected. Thank you all so much for the thoughtful responses and advice. I'm trying to read through everything and will hopefully post an update soon. Just to clarify a few common questions. Yes, we did file a police report. They said there wasn't really enough evidence to press charges since it would be hard to prove intent. We could possibly pursue a civil case, but we're not sure if we want to deal with the stress and expense of that right now. Jake and I are looking into couples counseling to help us process all of this. We're on the same page overall, but it's definitely put a strain on our relationship. Several people have asked about my job/insurance situation. I'm fortunate to have good health insurance through work, so the hospital bills weren't catastrophic. But between the ER visit, lost deposits for the honeymoon, etc., we're still out several $1,000s. To those suggesting we take the money and then cut contact anyway, I get where you're coming from, but I don't think I could do that in good conscience. If we take the money, it would be with the understanding that we're at least attempting to work things out. For those wondering about Sandra's financial situation, she's comfortable but not wealthy. The $5,000 is a significant amount for her. She's a retired teacher living off her pension and my late Phil's life insurance. Thanks again, everyone. You've given me a lot to think about. I'll update when we've made a decision. Update. Okay, it's been a few days and Jake and I have had a lot of long talks. We've made some decisions, so I wanted to update you all. First of all, thank you so much for all the advice and support. Reading through your comments really helped me process my feelings and see things from different angles. I shared many of your insights with Jake, and it led to some really productive conversations. So, here's where we've landed. 1. We are not taking the $5,000. As tempting as it was, we both felt it would muddy the waters and potentially make us feel obligated in some way. We're going to figure out the financial stuff on our own. 2. We are not cutting Sandra off completely, but we are enforcing very strict boundaries. Jake called her and laid out our terms. She must continue with individual therapy for at least 6 months, focusing specifically on her boundary issues and unhealthy attachment to Jake. After 6 months, if her therapist feels she's made significant progress, we'll consider family counseling sessions. For the next year, any contact will be supervised visits only. No one-on-one time with either of us, and absolutely no contact with any future children until we feel we can trust her. She must write me a detailed letter of apology, acknowledging exactly what she did wrong and how it impacted us. No excuses or justifications allowed. She must tell the extended family the full truth about what happened at the wedding. No more vague excuses or minimizing. 3. Jake and I are starting couples counseling next week. We both feel like we need some professional help processing all of this and making sure our relationship stays strong. 4. We're planning a do-over wedding reception for our 1-year anniversary. Nothing huge, just a nice dinner party with our closest friends and family to celebrate the way we should have been able to originally. Sandra will not be invited. 5. We've decided to put our baby plans on hold for at least a year while we work through all of this. We both want to be in a really solid place emotionally and as a couple before bringing a child into the mix. Sandra's initial reaction to all of this was, not great. She cried and pleaded, saying we were being too harsh. But Jake stood firm. He told her that this was her one and only chance, and if she couldn't abide by our rules, she would be cut off for good. She eventually agreed to everything. I still have a lot of complicated feelings about all of this. I'm not sure I'll ever be able to fully trust Sandra again. But I do think this is the best path forward for now. It gives us the space and boundaries we need while still leaving the door open for potential reconciliation down the road. Thank you all again for your help and support. This community has been an amazing resource during a really difficult time. I'll post another update in a few months to let you know how things are going. Final update, it's been about 8 months since my last post, and a lot has happened. I wanted to give you all one final update on the situation. The good news first, Jake and I are doing really well. The couples counseling has been incredibly helpful. We've worked through a lot of the anger and resentment that was bubbling up after the wedding disaster. I feel like we're closer and stronger as a couple than ever before. We're tentatively starting to discuss baby plans again, which feels both exciting and scary. We had our do-over wedding reception a couple of months ago. It was small and intimate, just our closest friends and my parents. It was everything our original reception should have been, joyful, relaxed, and full of love. We even did a little vow renewal ceremony. There were definitely some bittersweet moments, thinking about how things should have been the first time around, but overall it was a beautiful day. Now for the not-so-good news, things with Sandra have been complicated. She did stick to our rules for the most part. She's been seeing a therapist regularly and by all accounts has been doing the work. She wrote me a long, heartfelt letter of apology that actually seemed pretty genuine. And she did come clean to the extended family about what really happened at the wedding. We had our first supervised visit with her about 3 months after my last post. It was incredibly awkward and tense. Sandra was trying so hard to be on her best behavior that she came across as almost robotic. Jake and I were both on edge the whole time. We've had a handful of similar visits since then, and while they've gotten marginally less uncomfortable, there's still a long way to go. The real test came about a month ago. We agreed to have Sandra over for dinner, the first time she'd be in our home since that day she showed up with the $5,000. Jake and I were both nervous wrecks leading up to it. Things actually started out okay. Sandra brought a nice bottle of wine, which she made a point of opening in front of us to show it was sealed. We made awkward small talk about the weather and her garden. But then, she slipped up. We were talking about our do-over reception, and Sandra got this wistful look on her face. "I wish I could have been there," she said softly. "I hate that I ruined your first one. I just wanted everything to be perfect. I felt Jake tense up beside me. Mom, he said warningly. We've talked about this. You didn't do what you did because you wanted things to be perfect. You did it because you were jealous and wanted to hurt Op. Sandra's face crumpled. I know, she said. But you have to understand, I was so afraid of losing you. Op was taking you away from me. I just wanted my little boy back. And just like that, all the progress of the past months evaporated. Jake exploded, yelling about how Sandra still didn't get it, how she was making excuses instead of taking real responsibility. I mostly sat there in shock, feeling like we were right back where we started. Sandra left in tears. Jake and I had a long, intense discussion afterwards. We realized that while Sandra might be saying the right things in therapy, she hadn't truly internalized them. She was still seeing me as a threat rather than as her son's partner. She still viewed her relationship with Jake as a competition that she was losing. We decided that we needed to take a big step back. We're not cutting Sandra off entirely, but we are significantly reducing contact. Jake calls her once a week to check in, but we're stopping the in-person visits for now. We've told her that until she can really, truly accept our relationship and respect our boundaries, we need to keep our distance. It's been hard on Jake. I know he still loves his mom and wants to believe she can change. But he also sees now how toxic her behavior has been, not just towards me but towards him as well. He's started unpacking a lot of childhood stuff in his individual therapy sessions. As for me, I've come to terms with the fact that I will probably never have a close relationship with my mother-in-law. It's sad, and not what I had hoped for when Jake and I got married. But I also feel a sense of relief. I'm no longer twisting myself in knots trying to win her approval or walking on eggshells around her. We're moving forward with our lives. We're talking about trying for a baby in the next few months. We've agreed that when we do have a child, Sandra will not be allowed unsupervised contact under any circumstances. Jake is fully on board with this. I still have moments of anger when I think about what happened at our wedding. But mostly, I just feel pity for Sandra. She's pushed away the people who should be closest to her because she couldn't let go of her need for control. Unless she has a major breakthrough in therapy, she's going to miss out on so much, seeing her grandchildren grow up, being part of our family's big moments. It's a steep price to pay for her actions. Looking back on everything that's happened, I'm actually grateful in a weird way. This whole ordeal forced Jake and me to have a lot of difficult conversations early in our marriage. We've had to be a united front, to set boundaries, to really examine our values and priorities as a couple. In many ways, I think we're stronger for having gone through this. To everyone who offered advice and support through all of this, thank you, from the bottom of my heart. Your perspectives helped me navigate one of the most difficult periods of my life. This community has been an incredible source of strength and wisdom. I think this will be my last update on the situation, at least for the foreseeable future. We're closing this chapter and focusing on building our life together. If anything major changes down the line, I'll be sure to let you all know. But for now, we're looking towards the future with hope and optimism. Wishing you all the best. Op. Edit. Wow, I'm overwhelmed by all the supportive comments and messages. Thank you all so much. A few people have asked some follow-up questions, so I'll try to address the most common ones. 1. Several people asked if we ever considered legal action against Sandra. We did consult with a lawyer early on, but ultimately decided not to pursue anything. The emotional toll of a drawn-out legal battle just wasn't worth it to us. We wanted to focus on healing and moving forward. 2. Regarding the $5,000, we never took it. Sandra tried to give it to us again during one of our supervised visits, but we refused. We ended up dipping into our savings to cover the wedding/medical expenses. It was tough financially for a while, but we're slowly rebuilding our nest egg. 3. A lot of you have expressed concern about potential grandparents' rights if/when we have kids. We've already spoken to a family lawyer about this. In our state, Sandra would have very little grounds for any kind of visitation rights, especially given the documented history of her actions. We're prepared to fight it if it ever comes to that, but hopefully it won't. 4. To those asking about my own parents, they've been incredibly supportive through all of this. They live far away, but they've been making an effort to visit more often. My mom has especially stepped up, offering advice and emotional support. It's made me appreciate them even more. 5. Jake and I are both still in therapy, individual and couples. It's been so helpful in processing everything and strengthening our relationship. I can't recommend it enough for anyone going through family difficulties. Thank you again for all the kind words and support. It means more than you know.